Shawn Wells is internationally recognized as the world's greatest formulator and the ingredientologist. That's a word. the ingredientologist, the scientist of ingredients. With over a decade of clinical experience as a chief clinical dietitian and an impressive track record of formulating over 1,100 products, including supplements, food, beverages, and cosmeceuticals, Shawn's expertise is well sought after in the biohacking, anti-aging, and health optimization space. He has patented over 40 novel ingredients and has developed a reputation as the world's leading nutritional biochemist. Today, he's excited to share his latest innovation, Update, which offers a cleaner, more effective alternative to traditional caffeine. And we're going to get into that a lot today with respect to caffeine. Do you think that there is such thing as big caffeine? We can save that for later.
That's a really interesting question. Like,
we have big pharma, we have big tech.
I believe so to some degree. I mean, it's not being levied in the same way, but anything that is that large, you're talking about I believe the most important ingredient to humanity. Probably there's two ingredients, alcohol and caffeine, over the last 150 years that have really reshaped humanity. We need caffeine to get going in the morning. There's caffeine, the Starbucks, of which there's tens of thousands of stores worldwide. 90% of the population consumes caffeine in some form or another every single day. There's no other ingredient like that. If you think about if someone showers, if someone eats, if someone poops, that might not happen with 9 out of 10 people daily. Mm-hmm. Caffeine is 9 out of 10. That tells you like how widespread caffeine's use or dependence might be the better word is across the globe. This isn't just the United States. We wouldn't have had the Industrial Revolution without it. The growth of second and third shift. So many global markets have been dependent on caffeine for productivity. Mm-hmm. So I do think to some degree there is a big caffeine, but what could be even more interesting is, I don't know if you've seen like The Last of Us, for example. It's a video game. It's a popular show on HBO, and there is a cordyceps. Maybe you know about cordyceps mushrooms, right? Like that needs to spread throughout humanity as this kind of zombie virus, if you will. And I do wonder if plants didn't put forward caffeine so that we would grow more plants and we would be dependent on it and it would spread throughout the planet. The coffee, the green tea, all these sources of caffeine that we have take up massive real estate across the planet. And normally plants are dependent on birds, on bees, on different animals to, eat this plant, poop it out, spread it. I mean, what's more powerful than this way of spreading these caffeinated sources of plants?
That's a good point. I've talked before, I think it was on the last episode or the one previous to that, with how a lot of shamans will say that there's the spirit of this plant, the spirit of this plant, the spirit of that plant. So it seems to be that people who are more spiritually tapped in, you could say, talk about there's an actual entity or spirit attached to certain plants. So maybe given that this is a realm of mind, the individuation of mind has come into form, metaphysically into these plants, and it has its own ability to imaginate and also to orient its consciousness to create more of itself. Maybe it is imbued with some of these qualities that we also have, that we think we are separate as human beings, that makes us more distinct, right?
Exactly.
That it also possibly has that.
It's a come at a cost ingredient. It takes its toll. We need it. We want it. We're dependent on it. Like if you see that line at Starbucks, like especially when I, speak at different events or, I'm at these expos, the line at those things is like literally at 7, 8 a.m., hundreds of people long, and they will wait for it. They'll wait an hour and a half for their coffee because they can't get going without it. They're dependent on it. Coffee owns them. Mm. They don't own their day. And so I do think that potentially is the case. 90% of people, like I said, are having it every day, but also 9 out of 10 people want to consume less. So there's a cognitive dissonance there where I can't make it without it. I know this isn't good for me, but I just need it today. Mm-hmm. And that's true with so many dopaminergic things, right? Like where we just need the internet porn to get through today. We just need the gambling to get through today, the drinking, the whatever it is, the news cycle, like whatever you're feeling addicted to.
Insert in heroin in place of coffee.
Right.
And most people who ironically drink coffee would freak out at hearing someone like say, "Oh, I'm dependent on heroin. I need heroin to get through my day." The only reason that it's acceptable when it comes to coffee or caffeine, or literally insert any other thing that is, quote, morally justifiable or socially acceptable, is because of that belief surrounding social acceptance. And I think it's because there's such a commonality of people addicted to it, and it's not a controlled substance, and as far as I know, in like virtually all of the world. And also, there's no immorality attached to it. For example, like with pornography, people attach some sort of like, people typically do it in secret and like keep it from their spouse and things like this. So there's secrecy and a lack of morality attached to it. Whereas when it comes to coffee and caffeine, it's like, oh, this is socially acceptable, so therefore my addiction is not actually a true addiction. When in reality, let's be real, it's a fucking addiction. Like, dude, so many people are addicted to caffeine and coffee. And I have been at times one of those people, and I fully admit it. My wife would probably say the same thing. There's something about me where I like love the ritual of coffee. Like we even bought a book by recommendation of our friend who had a book on how to make the perfect pour over you grind them to a certain fineness, and you heat your water to a certain degree. You do the blooming method, like all these things. It was like a ritual. But it's so funny because growing up, I actually hated the smell of coffee. So when people talk about loving coffee, I wonder if they really actually love it for its taste and its smell, or if it's just something that maybe the spirit of the coffee plant has made it so people become addicted to it for all these reasons. And of course, the social dynamic behind that as well. But do we actually really love coffee for its taste and its smell?
It's such an amazing question that gets into like psychosomatic anchoring, right? Like where we have the ritual, which is important, where you start attaching, like when I have my coffee, I'm relaxing, I'm looking at the sunrise, I'm, waking up, maybe taking 10 minutes to myself to just slow down. Like you said, like, especially when you have to grind it, brew it, pour it, the whole ritual to it, right? Like there's work, there's, some beauty to that you're putting into it, almost like
artistic expression,
like
almost
Japanese kind of way of expressing yourself through like perfection of a craft. And it's such a great point that there is a ritual to it, and one of the most powerful sensory anchors is smell, and so that becomes a thing too, the brewing of it. And what's interesting is when I say, well, could you do decaffeinated coffee in the morning? Grind it, brew it, smell it, drink it, have your ritual, and not have the caffeine, but possibly have paraxanthine that we get into. People seem very conflicted about that idea. They can't remove the caffeine component. And we've shown in data through the years that caffeine, there's a physiologic dependence. It is clear. There's an adaptation effect too. That physiologic dependence means that you need it every day. Your body is compelled to have it. And they've shown in a study with animals that by the third day, the animals needed that dose of caffeine just to get to baseline. So that's how quickly you're adapting.
What were the metrics that they used to like say baseline?
In terms of like cognitive function and performance, like, running a maze, et cetera.
Okay.
So
got it.
they needed that caffeine just to get to where the other animals were 3 days ago without any of the caffeine.
In 3 days' time,
In
they
3
developed their
days.
dependence to that level. That's insane.
Yes.
Wow.
So the adaptation effect, where you need more and more and more to get the same effect, and then the physiologic dependence, where I need my caffeine just to get going. Like, I'm not human until I have my caffeine, like all the coffee cups and mugs that say all this stuff. It's really true. So there is that phenomenon that's happening where people are adapted. They're having the coffee, they're dependent on it, and it's no longer giving them the effect it used to. I mean, you remember when you had maybe a Coca-Cola as a kid and you would be like zooming around like you were nuts. Now, if you have one, you want to go to bed.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's that adaptation effect. But beyond that, then we can get into fast and slow metabolizers, where the majority of the population now are slow metabolizers of caffeine with the CYP1A2 gene. And that means that they're not processing caffeine well. So 60+% of us are slowly metabolizing caffeine. And what the problem is, caffeine itself is actually fairly toxic. It's in plants to repel insects. And we get all the side effects from the caffeine. We actually get almost all the benefits from the paraxanthine. And so when you're slowly metabolizing the caffeine, you're stuck with all the side effects and basically getting none of the benefits. And the variation in terms of bioindividuality is massive. So for some people, it's 1.5 hour half-life for caffeine. And for me, and maybe those on the other end, it's 10.5 hours. That's like a 7x difference. So the way you may experience caffeine and the way I may experience caffeine is very different.
Mm-hmm.
Could be drastically different.
I know for me, my experience of caffeine, and I think it's evolved over the years, and I think it's really like a diminishing returns effect, is that, and I still drink coffee. That's the ironic thing. So there really probably is still some level of addiction there, just like loving the ritual or the social aspect of it. Like my wife and I talk about having our morning coffee as we sit outside and watch our kids play and things like this. But for me, when I drink coffee now, I just get gut issues. I feel anxious. I notice that my face starts to get more flush and red. And then I would say, I don't know that I necessarily feel tired, but I definitely don't feel super energized. The energy, quote unquote, is really just a form of anxiety that I feel after I have coffee. So for me, like, there is no positive effects associated with it, but I think that's the thing that is so difficult. I'll speak for myself here, but I'd imagine a lot of people feel the same, is the social aspect of coffee and how we've become so culturally conditioned to have, whether we're consciously aware of it or not, so much of our day or lives in general and just the way we go about, and especially in Western society, around coffee and caffeine. Like you meet someone where? At a coffee shop. You either meet them for dinner or at a coffee shop, right? You meet someone for coffee. You, like I said with my wife, we go have coffee. Like you always say, I'm just going to run and go grab a coffee. Like it's such a common thing culturally. You order t-shirts off websites, or you order what? Mugs. It's such a common piece of our culture nowadays.
Exactly. It's ingrained into the zeitgeist. And so the first half of the day, we're told that we need to use caffeine. And then towards the end of the day, we're told the way that we socialize and connect and wind down is going to be alcohol. And these two ingredients have really shaped society. Mm-hmm. But if you're looking at, Gen Z and beyond, then you're seeing that this group of people that are coming up are looking for, no pun intended, a better way forward, where they're not stuck on these chemicals that they become dependent on. Mm-hmm. And they're either, like you're saying, having all these side effects, not getting sleep, feeling anxious, feeling flush, which is like a histaminergic response, which means there's some kind of like almost immunological response happening there, an allergenic response at least. And then in the evening, they're getting alcohol, which is impairing sleep, which is a toxin, and then they may be throwing up and all those kinds of things. And it's like, at what cost? Like, what is this actually achieving for me? Are these things improving me as an organism? One, on a physiologic level, two, on a spiritual level. And if you think about this idea of caffeine being a come at a cost ingredient, and there's cognitive dissonance around it, and we know it's not healthy for us, but we know we continue to do it, and therefore you're not living in your truth, you're not doing what's optimal for you physiologically, what does that mean spiritually for you? How does that show up for you? Like, every good facilitator, I've done many, many journeys, one of the things they'll always say is, where else is that showing up for you?
Mm.
That's interesting. Like, whatever you have to complain about, it's always you. It's always like rooted back in you.
Totally.
You create your reality. You create your existence. So how else is that showing up for you? If you keep saying, I'm going to kick that can down the road, I'm not responsible, it's really controlling me. I need it just one more day. How else does that show up for you?
Yeah.
Where else are you selling that yourself short? Where else are you selling your family short, your friends short, your job short? How much better could you be if you lived in your truth?
So much bigger than just the act of choosing coffee. What it's pointing back to is, what are you continuing to choose in your life in general that you know is not good for you, yet you continue to do it. And those choices ultimately come back to you. Love what you said there about, like, you are the creator of this realm. I talk about that all the time. Like, we are co-creating this experience together here. I do wonder, and I always go back and forth on this, and maybe I can pose this question to you later on. But whether there's an objective sort of program set forth by an omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, all the omnis creator that sets an objective program, and then we have a window of creation within that. But I'll pose that question later on. But I think about that all the time.
I mean, we can talk about it now if you want.
Well, I want to get to, before we continue on with caffeine, before we can get into all that stuff, because I know you love talking about that too, and then Paraxanthine and update. Yeah. I want to learn a little bit more about your background, because I think it will ultimately probably lead into discussions surrounding consciousness.
Yeah. Thank you. I can already feel a connection between us, that we're brethren in this level. For me, I grew up a highly sensitive person. It's like a term I learned not too long ago after I got done speaking on stage about bridging science and soul, talking about the science of psychedelics, and why I'm very passionate about it, because I was living with depression most of my life. Suicidal thoughts was a daily occurrence, and I was definitely ideating that, sometimes even acting out some behaviors that could have resulted in that. I grew up with a very difficult childhood. I don't like to, at this point, continue to anchor back to that and create that as my story.
You're sharing it as context.
Yeah.
I do the same thing.
But I'm sharing it as context.
Yeah.
Because I've rewritten that story.
Right.
I've reframed that story. I'm not a victim.
And shows all the flavors of you, though, to what came to formulate who you are.
And I'm really proud of, I have a wonderful relationship now with my father, and I don't like the idea of chaining someone to their past no more than I want to be. Right. So the result of my brothers running away, going through a difficult childhood as well, and myself, was feeling like I am responsible for the peace in the home, that I became highly empathic, trying to read the room, trying to keep myself safe, trying to please everyone so that trauma wouldn't develop, that I could keep everyone in the home safe, content, and happy. And as the baby, as the youngest, that's how I entered the world. like thinking all of this was my responsibility. So, that developed further down the line into a lot of autoimmune issues, the Epstein-Barr, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, Hashimoto's, brain tumors. I've had surgeries all over my body. I have 2 discs replaced in my neck, hip surgery, knee surgeries. I've had a lot of health issues, but it was because I was gaslighting myself, hating myself, imposter syndrome. I was my own worst enemy.
I'm over here smiling during your story off camera, and it's not because I'm like, oh yeah, this is it's because, dude, the amount of, we'll talk off camera, the amount of parallels there, like even relationship with dad, the amount of parallels is crazy, crazy with my life.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, honestly, I think the people that we call into our sphere would connect with us on that level. Yeah, the people that we call into our lives, I think there's no mistakes there, right? We are vibrating at some certain level with certain learnings. We're creating our existence, like you said. And I think that makes sense that we're here today. Like, it didn't happen a year ago. It didn't happen 2 years ago. It didn't happen a year from now. We might be on different paths, but right now we're intersecting.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's beautiful. So you went through those sort of experiences growing up, and then at what point did you start, I guess this is sort of a 2-part question, exploring consciousness? I'd imagine that, I'm going to guess, it evolved as a result of you looking for ways to deal with this depression and suicidality that you were experiencing. I think at this point you're probably already in the health space, from, if I remember your story correctly, from hearing you on other podcasts and things. But that's what led you to start looking into consciousness and things like this?
Yeah, I was doing all the biohacks to keep myself alive. I wasn't really good. And I think there's so many biohackers like this that they're not that healthy mentally, spiritually.
Dude, and it's all one thing. And so I always think back to Walter Russell's quote, and this is paraphrased, that trying to figure out cause and effect in reality is futile. That's paraphrased, because there's only one true cause, and that is God. And so when I look at that, both for better and for worse, so to speak, is that if you are cutting off or making a fuzzy connection between you and the creator, whether it's because of the emotions, traumas, things like that you've experienced over the course of your life that are stored in your field, stored in the waters of your body, stored in your being, that you are not dealing with at some level. And there's countless ways you can go about dealing with those. I won't prescribe a way that is you must deal it with this way. But if you're not doing that, then you are ultimately cutting yourself off, you could say, from the one true cause of joy, of peace, of true health. And ultimately, these biohacks are only focusing on physical health, might remediate some of the symptoms temporarily. It might, maybe for some people, it does it for their entire life. I don't know. But the overwhelming majority of people that I know ultimately come to the conclusion on the natural health journey that of course, diet is a huge piece, without question. Of course, this is a huge piece. Of course, these physical things are pieces. But I've come to the conclusion that the most important thing when it comes to health is your emotional and spiritual health. That is by far the most important thing, in my opinion. And I think so many people in the biohacking space overlook that, or they look at things like breath work as these sort of quick fixes in order to either suppress the symptoms continually. It's I just need to just do breath work to breathe it away. It's almost like that mentality, whether they say that or not is another thing, but that's kind of what I take from it. It's like a quick fix in order to just not deal with what is coming up or to suppress what is coming up. But yes, I've come to the sort of same conclusion. You're over there nodding your head. It's all emotional and spiritual and mental.
Yeah. I mean, the proof of that would be if you look at the people that live in these blue zones, right? These guys that maybe they're having cigars, maybe they're, eating whatever they're eating. Typically it's something seafood. Maybe it's fairly healthy, but they're drinking wine every night.
Probably drinking some caffeine.
Yeah, drinking doing espressos every day, all these things. And yet, if you look at it, they're spiritually healthy and happy. They're content. They're in these communities where they're important. They have purpose. They have family. They have connection. They typically do have religion, some kind of spirituality in their lives. So they're connected to source. They're connected to family. They're connected to tribe. They're connected to nature. Typically, these places are by water, a lot of natural environment that they're walking in every day. They're outside, right? All the things Fauci didn't want us to do.
Right.
I won't say anything nefarious there.
Right. Little weird,
but draw
though.
your own conclusions.
Yeah, a little weird, though, huh?
He's like, oh, where did 6 feet come from? I don't know. But
the human biofield extends out 6 feet.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Our aura, our holobiont, extends 6 feet or 5 feet.
Yeah.
So it's 6 feet social distancing. But anyway, yes, that's so true. And you see those people are super centenarians. They're living past 100 years old. And on the flip side, I see these people that are some of the most famous biohackers that are doing PRP, stem cells, 300 supplements a day, that are doing red light and saunas and blah, 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 and all the things. And they look like they're 20 years older than they are.
Right.
It's, draw your own conclusions there. But I know to that end, that's my point. When I was doing a lot of these biohacks, learning these hacks, one, it is hack. It is hacking into your biology. It's not loving your biology, knowing your biology, appreciating your biology. Now, when I look back, I'm so thankful because yes, I was gaslighting myself. Yes, I was working 100 hours a week. Yes, I was miserable. And I learned a lot. I accomplished a lot. And I'm so thankful that that version of me did all that, or else I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have those credentials. I wouldn't have created those ingredients. I wouldn't have been able to connect to all these people that I connect with on stage because I needed to go through the suffering. I needed my hero's journey. And that's what made me be empathic. That's what made me care. So yes, I agree 100% on that the spiritual component is absolutely important. And that led to me searching, seeking. I was literally on death's door when I decided to go that psychedelic route. It was the last step, the last option. I believed that I was either going to kill myself intentionally or kill myself through work. I knew it was imminent. It was very imminent. I was getting very sick and I was just diving into work. It was 100+ hours a week at that point, and I truly hated myself and I hated living. And no matter what I accomplished, no matter what I gained financially, it was never enough. It was just an empty hole. And there was no satiating that. It was whatever it was like you could do more. Why didn't you do more? I never celebrated anything. It was just an empty existence.
Do you think that stemmed ultimately back from, I'll say this, from my experience, hearing yours, it sounds like there's a lot of similarities so far, especially with trying to control what was going on in my environment to make sure everyone felt safe, acting as the surrogate father and surrogate husband sometimes for my mom. And then with my dad, the relationship was just not good. I sort of went through life feeling totally unworthy and feeling like the only way that I could have any worthiness was by seeking outside of myself. And of course, you will never find worthiness outside of yourself. So you're perpetually seeking outside of yourself. And no matter what you accumulate there, it's never going to be enough. It's never going to fill that void of truly loving yourself internally. Do you think that's where it stemmed from?
Yeah.
I mean, you're nodding.
Yeah, you got it.
Right.
I think your story is my story, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
Obviously there's differences, but there's so much similarity there. And this is where conversation is so helpful because you can always glean a different perspective on your own experience, right?
Yeah.
When it's a similar one. So
it's validating, man.
It's
so validating.
It is. Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah.
As far as the psychedelic experience, that was a powerful one. My first journey, I did it with some very famous people, including, one or two of the most famous biohackers in the world. I mean, I won't name names of all the celebrities that were at this experience. I was embarrassed to be there.
Imposter syndrome type thing?
Imposter syndrome, so bad. I remember like being excited about it and then being like, oh my God, like I because I knew nothing about psychedelics and all these people were popular and famous. And normally I would walk into a room and tell you why I'm important, why you should love me, why I'm worthy of being here, to the end you were just talking about, basically giving my resume and bullet points, because I always felt like love was conditional, and this time I did not do that. I was like cowering in the corner, and these facilitators ended up being absolutely incredible and two of the most important people in my life, Ta and Cole Whitty. They're here in Austin.
Nice.
And I went in pretty deep. And what was amazing is I was on, I don't know if people know this terminology, a cuddle puddle on the floor, but basically I didn't leave the floor. It's like a pallet of blankets and cushions. And, when you're in deep, like you're not like running around dancing or, having a great time. You're just kind of processing like really deep stuff. And all these people kept circling me, laying by me, getting me things. Do you need a drink? Can I help you go to the bathroom? Holding space for me, laughing with me the whole night. And all I could think is, why? They don't even know who I am. They don't know I have value. I shouldn't be important to them. These are celebrity type people. They should be, out with each other, accumulating status and doing all the things that they normally do, as, according to my brain. Why would they be taking this time with me? And then it hit me that I could just have love and be loved. And that's when everything shifted for me. And once you anchor that in your heart and you make that your truth, that is a massive shift in your spirituality and your physiology. I felt inflammation leave my body. I felt pain leave my body. I felt depression leave my body. And I felt life was now wide open for what I could experience. I could have heaven on earth instead of hell on earth. I could recreate, reshape, reframe this existence now to include love, and that I deserved love, and I could be a human being and be loved, and not just be worthy as a human doing.
In nearly all cases with modern health systems, you're waiting months for appointments only to spend a mere 10 minutes with a doctor who quickly hands out a generic diagnosis that is likely rooted in a total misunderstanding of health and causes, and then you're offered a one-size-fits-all medication or invasive treatments with unpleasant side effects. If this sounds all too familiar, consider a different approach with the New Biology Clinic, founded by Dr. Tom Cowan, a respected natural health doctor, author, and speaker. Dr. Cowan's holistic perspective on health and wellness and a deep understanding of the true nature of health and disease sets this clinic apart. With the New Biology Clinic, it's not about quick fixes and suppressing symptoms. The practitioners take time to understand your unique story, recognizing that health is unique to the individual and that illnesses have a variety of causes, physically and metaphysically. Members of the New Biology Clinic enjoy a flat monthly fee that includes a range of valuable services like health consults as needed, practitioner-led live streams on diverse health topics, access to a members-only resource library, and multiple live group sessions every month. These sessions cover fitness, breathing integration, biofield tuning, guided meditation, EFT tapping, and much more. Unlike traditional healthcare systems that thrive on frequent visits, prescriptions, treatments, and suppressing symptoms, the New Biology Clinic's motivation is to make you healthy and keep you that way. Visit newbiologyclinic.com to learn more and use code The Way Forward for $50 off your account activation. If you're a member of The Way Forward, email hello@thewayforward.com to receive $150 off your account activation. Your journey to genuine healing begins here. I love that so much. Yeah. It's so interesting, like whatever methods you use to come into more genuine, not forced, but genuine self-love. I think like, I always think of things in terms of water, right?
Mm-hmm.
Given that we're water-based beings, 2/3 by weight, 99% molecularly water. And we know now that water is likely fourth phase water per the work of Gerald Pollack. And when with Veda Austin's work and Masaru Emoto's work, when it comes to water, when you are genuinely directing your thought energy consistently towards love and projecting that into your being, into your biofield, that is turning all of your water into loving water. The waters of your body become loving water. So whatever methods you need, and I just interviewed Irene Lyon, nervous system expert, and she would say there's still some subconscious things there, and I do agree with that too. Obviously, like it takes a very, very high level, let's say, guru who's been meditating in a cave for a while to just be able to only orient their thought energy, or sometimes these transcendental experiences through medicine ceremonies to do the same. But overwhelmingly, what I'm getting at is if you can consistently cultivate that thought energy, that means thought and feeling, focused at something consistently towards love, I think you can orient the waters of your body to be love, and then they will express, and then your biofield will express that love. And then when you're coming from that position of love, and I got this from my good friend Tom Barnett out of Australia. Shout out to Tom for this. And this is going to be a butchered paraphrased version of what he says. But when you are not operating in lack, when you are not in need of anything externally, you will actually achieve everything because you're not putting out lack from your field, and then you will receive more lack if that's what you're doing. If you're coming from a position of, I have everything that I need inside of me, ironically, you will start receiving more things. You will start receiving all that's outside of you, but also ironically, you won't have any attachment to them anyway. But it's such a weird way that this realm is sort of a feedback loop with us as individuated creators. Like when you're coming from a position of love and you really are, operating from a perspective of such genuine self-love, that will appear outside of you. Your reality will start reflecting that way.
Yeah. Scarcity creates that attachment, right? I love Alan Watts. You got the book here behind your head. Like right. I listen to him all the time. But that's so great. Like I studied NLP, neuro-linguistics programming, and they talk about that a lot. Like when someone says what they don't want, that denotes that scarcity type thinking, and you're actually calling that in.
Right.
When you're like, I don't want to be broke, your brain is hearing be broke, right? What is it that you do want? And then repeat that, envision that, call that in, live that, breathe that, make that a mind movie to where it's already happened and it will come in.
Mm-hmm.
It can't not come in once you've felt it on all senses.
Yeah. I think the big piece is you have to release attachment to how it will come in.
Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always interesting. It always comes in a different way. And there's always like a reframe, a lesson, a learning before you get that thing.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely. You're either growing or learning. There's no losing.
Exactly.
You're never losing. You're never failing. You're just learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So on your journey, now going towards the more formulation, the ingredientologist side of things, is that a real word?
I made that.
Okay, I was going to say, I'm like, that is the most epic word
of ingredients.
I love it so much. So when did you become fascinated in sort of biochemistry and ingredientology as a subfield, I guess you could say, especially as it ties into the health and wellness space? And I want to preface this by saying, I consider myself to be like a natural health maximalist, let's say. Like very big on putting my bare feet on the earth, getting the negative charge from the earth, getting my body into the sun so I can receive the infrared light from the sun and the life force energy that is the sun, providing life and sustenance for this entire realm, and drinking clean, ideally spring water, if not reverse osmosis water. Point being, I could name all the things. I'm very big on health via natural means. With that being said, I acknowledge that people in a laboratory setting can impress upon the ingredients and the formulation of things through alchemical processes some very amazing stuff. But I am also highly skeptical of those things pretty consistently, especially because the wellness space is continuing to grow like crazy, and everyone swears that they have the best product ever. I don't want to get into update yet, but I'm sure for those of you who watch my podcast consistently, maybe not you guys listening, but if you watch consistently, this is always sitting on this little side table right here. I'm drinking these pretty consistently, so I do drink Update quite a bit. But all that being said, lots of skepticism towards what goes on in laboratory settings, but also acknowledge that you can impress upon with your own, the waters of your body and pushing that out through your biofield, some incredible intention onto things. And then of course, things themselves have their own objective, you could say, energy that are parts of them. And you can create and synthesize things in labs that actually are helpful to human physiology and human health. So I just want to throw that out there. And I say both, that I'm skeptical while also that understanding. So how did you get involved in sort of being an ingredientologist?
I mean, first off, you're absolutely right to be skeptical. I think there's a lot of people that are scamming us, trying to use us, manipulate us. But we can rise above that vibration. We can find each other. Even what's frustrating, even in this self-help or psychedelic realms or plant medicine or breath work or yoga or whatever, even in these spaces where you think someone has higher consciousness, you still find manipulativeness.
And it's almost worse that way, dude.
Well, because of that, speaking of dissonance, it feels so wrong.
Because it's like they should know better. Like when you come across someone who's like that, it's like you of all people should know better than that, dude. Or at least you profess like you do.
And that's that I believe typically the people that are in those spaces doing that, it's more that wounded healer space.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I was in that space for a while, like until I truly did the work. Even after that first journey, I thought I was like done. I was just getting started, and I was a wounded healer. Like I was not healthy with the way I loved. Yeah. Like I would, love and then run, that kind of thing. So
would you say this is an accurate statement for just medicine journeys in general?
Yeah.
The journey is not the work. The journey gives you a taste of what's possible when you do the work while also showing you the work that needs to be done.
1,000%. Absolutely. Dead on. The work is in the months and years to come.
Yeah.
That's in the integration. And going back to that idea of dissonance, I do believe if you do the journey and then go back to your environment and live it as you were before, but now you know the truth is no longer stored in unconscious and subconscious, but it's now clear in conscious mind, and you're not acting upon it. Now you're literally flat out lying to yourself, and you know this is the wrong thing, and you're still doing it every day. So going back to that dissonance of the caffeine, where else does that show up in your life? That could be an example of that, where it could be doing more harm than good if you're not willing to do the work that follows it.
Right.
And that's where a great facilitator, one, doesn't hijack your journey. They're asking questions. They want you to come to your own conclusions, reveal your own truth. Be careful with gurus and self-proclaimed shaman and all these things. But two, they're going to guide you in those months and years to come, hold you accountable, and have you live out your truth, integrate that work. And that's not easy. No. For me, that involved me getting a divorce, breaking up businesses, leaving business partners, all kinds of things that had spun out and are still playing out in my life right now that are not easy. But is it right? 100% right. I am walking that path to reveal the best man that I can possibly be. And I wake up every morning passionate about becoming a better man than I was yesterday.
Beautiful. Man, I so appreciate that, because what that says to me, what I took from that is the importance of staying in honor.
Yeah.
And irrespective of how hard it's going to be, you can only dishonor yourself so long to where it, won't start impacting your physiology, impacting you spiritually, creating scars, you could say. It comes a point where no matter how hard it is, in order to be in honor, you've got to walk that path. And what's so interesting in, creating parallels in my life, where I've experienced that too, when you choose the harder right over the easier wrong, it actually ends up feeling easier, even as you're unraveling all those things that are a little bit tough that you were living dishonorably. Honoring yourself and staying true to what you know to be true is ultimately very freeing internally, no matter how hard it seems in the external.
Exactly. And you can tie it all, you were mentioning the autonomic nervous system prior, which sounds like another guest talked about. You can tie it back to that degree of physiology or spirituality as well, like the yin and yang of the autonomic nervous system with parasympathetic and sympathetic. And we do need ultimately a balance. If we're chronically in one or the other, parasympathetic could show up as apathy if we're chronically parasympathetic. Most of us I was chronically sympathetic, where I was just ultra vigilant. I was always looking for the threat. I didn't know what it was to relax. I didn't ever yawn until my journey. And I was like, oh, that's what that is.
Wow.
This is like, wow, this is what it is to relax. I never felt safe.
Mm.
And so in the middle, if you can achieve that yin and yang, it doesn't always have to be in that same moment. Because, there's times when we should be parasympathetic, times when we should be sympathetic, times when you're in your masculine, if you want to call that sympathetic, and go get it, times when there's self-care, nurturing, nourishment. That's the feminine energy. Mm. But in that middle, that yin and yang, that balance of masculine and feminine is the flow state. When you're working for it, chasing it, but it's also you're playfully having it come in and it's flowing in and you're doing this twin flame kind of dance and you're achieving everything you want with ease.
Mm. Yeah. Wow. Okay. I got you off track there.
That's okay.
Now back to the biochemistry stuff.
Yes. So biochemistry. My mom sold Shackley supplements. This is back to the 70s. I'm 50 years old.
You look great, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
My dad's 53, so.
Amazing.
I had to throw that in there, by the way. I had to throw that in. My dad's 53.
Love to meet him. She sold these supplements like way before everyone else. Had like the little tackle box, with like all the different, and it was Vita-Lee. These were from Europe. And it was like a whole food multivitamin, and vitamin C was just getting talked about. Linus Pauling was about to come out with all this research around orthomolecular dosing, meaning very large doses of vitamin C and what it could do for immune function and all these things. And instead of just, kind of resolving deficiency, like when we were just talking about vitamins for like rickets and pellagra and, scurvy.
Right.
This is a whole different way of thinking. And she was very reliant on these supplements, would call upon these supplements. If I got sick, if I was feeling down, she would here, take this, here, take that. And it became this, speaking of alchemy is a word that has shown up like so many times in my life. And I love that word. So I'm glad that you've brought it up. I also love the word catalyst. Like I have like this like affection for these words. They just excite me. Mm-hmm. And I believed in the power of supplements. And when I became morbidly obese when I was very sick through depression. And I ended up using supplements pretty heavily to transform my body. It was just when creatine came out and EAS had this huge boom in the 90s. And I was using creatine and glutamine and BCAAs and, protein and working out and saw this massive transformation and started believing all this stuff. And then I was reading all the muscle magazines, reading these encyclopedias of bodybuilding or supplements. Then I'd be spending hours in GNCs, like literally like people would spend hours in a library or at a movie. I would just be reading labels, reading magazines. Like if I couldn't afford them at the time, I'd spend hours in either the bookstore or the GNC just reading these books. Literally, I'd sit down with, some encyclopedia of conditions or identifying symptoms and supplements and herbs. I was just obsessed with learning it. And this is kind of the rabbit hole I would typically go down, is just I become obsessed with things and I want to master it. And so when I transformed my body, people looked for me to help them. And then I became passionate about helping them, working at GNCs, working at other, mom and pops like vitamin shops. And then I decided to go back and get my master's in nutrition and biochemistry at Chapel Hill. And then I got my RD. My dream was to become a formulator. I saw this ad like in one of my muscle magazines with this guy, Dr. Marv Hoyer, who I actually got to meet in the industry. He was for, Muscle Tech, and he had like the little beakers, and he was there with bodybuilders that were like in the lab. And I was like, oh man, that would be so cool. Like, could you actually become a supplement formulator? So that was my dream. And I actually became that, and became, as far as I know, pretty much the most famous one to do it. But, it was a massive blessing to just have this guy in a magazine give me the idea. And I told him many times like how much I really appreciated him, being that way forward. And I keep saying that. So thank you for programming that into my brain. But I have other people that I mentor now that I'm watching do everything I do, like in half the time, a third of the time, because I laid that groundwork. There's a guy, Lucas, Ergogenic Health, that I mentor, and he's a formulator now, and he's like coming up and he's talking about ingredients, and I love it. And I love that someone can follow behind me and do it much faster because of me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I have a question when it relates to biochemistry, just because I'm curious. I've done a lot of deep dives into molecular biology and some of the techniques that they do, like a lot. In fact, I speak on it quite a bit in lectures. But the question I have is, when you're isolating a substance in biochemistry, let's go back in prior to the discovery, let's say, of vitamin C. What process, if you can recall off the top of your head, and of course you don't have anything in front of you right now, did they use to isolate those vitamins, like vitamin C? Like how many chemicals and other confounding variables and assumptions were involved in that process of discovering that thing?
Yeah, I mean, originally it would have been using solvents or like some kind of chemical reaction, or whether it's doing like hot water, cold water, alcohol, some kind of extraction method, or some kind of chemical solvent to extract out fat soluble, water soluble, certain components. And then in that you might have, this is where, like, for example, typically there is that entourage effect with these kinds of compounds when you look at them naturally, right? Like we talk about with different cannabinoids.
Yeah.
Like when you would have pulled naturally out the vitamin C, like we were just talking about, you would have also got the citrus bioflavonoids, which enhance its effect, enhance its bioavailability, enhance its efficacy. And when you isolate these compounds, sometimes you do not get that same effect.
Well, I also just wonder if, like, I haven't looked into biochemistry. I've looked on more the biology side of things, like claiming to isolate things. And I know on the biology side of things, the substances that are used in the process of identifying so-called distinct entities are themselves confounding variables that are, for example, I don't want to go off on a huge tangent on this, but the process of, quote, isolating a virus, they use amphotericin B, gentamicin, geneticin, and those are nephrotoxic chemicals that are nephrotoxic, meaning they're like toxic to kidneys specifically. And the substance that the cell cultures typically contain cell lines that are from an adult green monkey, which is Vero cells, Vero E6 or Vero CCL81, or human embryonic kidney cells. And they're using these substances that are known to be nephrotoxic to kidneys, assuming they have no effect on the kidney cells, but they're simply just there to keep the environment sterile and free of bacterial and fungal growth. And then also they add the substance, the snot from a sick person, to viral transport medium, which also contains several confounding variables. There's also downstream effects when it comes to using fetal bovine serum inside the culture, especially when it comes to trying to sequence this material, finding so-called distinct genetic material. My point is, like, in the biological side of things and like the biosciences, there's a lot of overlooked assumptions and confounding variables that are involved there. I'm just wondering if the same applies, because I don't know shit about biochemistry. So I'm just like interested. I know my audience is interested in this too when it comes to biochemistry, especially you being a formulator and a biochemist. Like, when you're isolating something, is it isolation in the common sense of the word? Because I know in virology, that is not the case. Like, it is overwhelmingly not the case in virology. So
that's a fascinating rabbit hole that you're going down, and I love that. I would say first off, with viruses, no one understands them. No one. And I mean that.
Yeah.
Even the world's greatest virologist has no idea what it is, whether they're living or dead, how to actually control them, what their purpose on the planet is. It could be like the answer to life's greatest questions if we truly could understand that. I think it's one of the most important things that could be studied or potentially understood. There may be a deeper spiritual reason or, something that they're messengers.
Maybe.
They're part of our evolution.
My thing is on that, and I don't want to go off on too deep of a tangent there because I don't want to get side railed. But for me, in order to make a claim about what a thing does, you have to first show that thing as a discrete entity. And we've commissioned 3 independent labs who have like 30-year trained molecular biologists to conduct the first ever control studies of the virological methodology, where we did the exact same technique that virologists follow in order to claim the presence and pathogenicity of a virus, except we did not use any sample of snot from a sick person. And the same cytopathic effect that virologists achieve and claim as proof of a virus, we achieved without any possible virus present in 90 out of 90 of our cultures, just by following the same concentrations of antibiotics, antibiotics, and also fetal bovine serum. And then we sent those to get transmission electron microscopy conducted on them. And we found that we had morphologically indistinguishable particles of the same size, shape, appearance as countless, quote, viruses that virologists refer to as discrete entities. And so
that's incredible.
Yeah. So like when it comes to virology, I question all of it, but I don't question it when it comes to like biochemistry. I'm just wondering like the isolation process.
Right. So my point there is that it's really hard for me to tell you anything when it comes to viruses.
Yeah,
it's like trying to describe like an octopus and how crazy, unique, and alien. Like literally half of scientists think they're alien. Like, so viruses are just like this whole other thing. But when it comes to these compounds in biochemistry, like we know that typically biochemistry means a pathway. You might mean organic chemistry when we're actually looking at the compound and how it might differ to other compounds.
Right.
So isolating those things out, to the point I was just making prior, is that you may lose some of the. I do think like God was the ultimate formulator.
Right.
So an example I've given in the past is like green tea. You have EGCG, L-theanine, caffeine. What do we know? Caffeine can be, obviously, as we've talked about, inhibit adenosine, create wakefulness, improve locomotor, reaction performance, et cetera, dopaminergic. And all the side effects. But we see L-theanine smooth out caffeine side effects, get you into more of that alpha brainwave state, more of that flow state. And then we also see EGCG be a powerful antioxidant and a vasodilator. Mm-hmm. So there's this entourage effect, this net effect that God has created in nature a lot of times. That all that said, it is important to that end to isolate these things out, to study them, because we don't know what it does until we get it down to its smallest form. Then we can add things in. Then we can see what the net effect is when we add in other things. This is why it's important. While, yes, I agree with the entourage effect with cannabinoids, for example, but it's also important to have done studies on CBD, on CBN, on CBG, and know what they do in isolation.
Right.
Also in isolation, we can create these compounds now through like a fermentation process. Mm-hmm. A number of the ingredients we're now creating are through a biological process with bacterial fermentation.
Got it.
So it's no longer being like necessarily like a solvent, pulling them out of these natural sources that may create a strain on the environment and be an issue in terms of sustainability. Like rhodiola rosea is now on the CITES list. It's now an endangered species, but the salidroside is the adaptogenic compound that's isolated from rhodiola rosea that has this powerful effect, helping with resilience. Mm-hmm. We can create that salidroside through fermentation. So we can make it naturally and synthesize it.
That's, first off, that's incredible. Second, the question that I have on that, let's take like caffeine, for example. And I spin on this all the time. How do we know for sure that the substance we have identified as caffeine in its isolated form is the same thing as the naturally occurring constituents, amalgamation of constituents that is inside of a coffee bean?
So that's a great question.
Yeah.
There is pure caffeine, which would be a caffeine anhydrous that would occur in these natural substances, and we can isolate out as a powder.
Yeah.
Or you can synthesize it.
Yeah.
And going back to that kind of entourage effect or some of these other synergistic effects, or maybe in some cases there are things that are actually counterproductive to that compound depending on what end or outcome you're looking for.
Got it.
So with caffeine, yes, there is a compound called trigonelline that occurs in coffee that has a synergistic effect with it. There is a polyphenol called chlorogenic acid that occurs in coffee that has a synergistic effect. This is why when we look at the data on coffee, it's different than the data on caffeine.
Yeah, and that's the point that I'm kind of getting at here. Yeah.
So when you look at just caffeine in isolation, that's when you see kind of typically the more negative effects. There is kind of a confounding effect when there is health promoting polyphenols, anti-aging polyphenols and antioxidants in the coffee that you're not getting when you have caffeine itself. Also, think about when we were talking about the alcohol before, when you look at blue zones and someone is having red wine but sipping it on a home cooked meal with their family and friends, they're praying, they have gratitude, they prepped that meal, they're sitting there for 3 hours eating in this beautiful experience. Alcohol is that psychosomatic anchor to tell you, wow, I'm safe. This is so good. Every time you have that sip of alcohol, you remember that experience. Same to that end with the coffee, right? When you are sipping, smelling that coffee, you're thinking of relaxing. You're thinking of being with your wife. You're thinking of watching your kids. You're thinking of, this is a beautiful day. I'm connecting with God and my creator. So that's hard to tease out of a study too, with something that's so ingrained into a lifestyle. So if you were going to do a study, I would do it without like someone who doesn't have coffee, period. And then look at that. But yes, to that end, we do see that coffee has a healthier net effect than caffeine. And also, when we look at caffeine and break out the study into fast and slow metabolizers with the CYP1A2 gene, when we look at fast metabolizers, they have positive health benefits. They see less stroke, less heart attack. Slow metabolizers, again, majority of the population, more stroke, more heart attack. So this is why almost all the data on caffeine, when you look at kind of these bigger studies where they haven't delineated that, this is where we see a lot of confounding data.
Right.
Where we see, well, does it increase stroke or decrease stroke? Does it, like, you see all these studies where it's like caffeine's healthy and like people want to share that because they're addicted to it. I've always thought this
too. Like, it's so confusing when it comes to coffee and caffeine because you do see so many conflicting studies. It's nuts.
Exactly. And people want to share the ones that, like,
of course, confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias. Exactly. Yeah. So, that's where that comes from. And this is what would lead into, I believe, the better way forward.
Yeah.
Caffeine 2.0, the evolution of caffeine. And that would be paraxanthine. And that's a wholly different experience.
Yeah. I'll say for me, like, drinking update, and I do truly mean that if you go back, if you were to watch like a bunch of my episodes on YouTube in this studio, at least, like, this is sitting right here. I do drink one almost every single episode. And it feels like so much more of a clean energy. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, like I said, with coffee now for me, I feel just a spike in anxiety, and it's not immediate. Like, I enjoy my coffee, I'm sitting there, and it's not every single time, but a lot of the times, more so often lately, I feel that spike in anxiety. I get some gut issues. I get that sort of red flush on my face. Mm-hmm. But with this, it's more of just a clarity of mind that I feel than it is like an amped up energy that I feel.
Yeah. And so there's a reason for that. While both paraxanthine and caffeine, when studied in isolation, we do see that they're both going to promote adenosine inhibition, meaning like adenosine actually makes you tired. Inhibiting adenosine from going, from being uptake in the receptor is going to create more wakefulness. And there can be a backlash effect with caffeine, like when you take too much of it too often, that like that crash is like when the body's trying to homeostatically circle back around and get the repair, the rest that you need. And that's where it's like energy, crash.
Yeah.
One of the reasons you're not seeing that with paraxanthine, it's actually more effective at adenosine inhibition, but there's other effects that are happening. So it's not just one mode or mechanism of action. It's multiple. So what we see with paraxanthine that we don't see with caffeine, one, it doesn't have all the side effects, the anxiety, the brain fog, the like inhibiting quality of sleep.
Yeah. Gut issues. I hear so many people with gut issues.
Literally, we see it dramatically worse in HRV. Especially, again, if like the more slow of a metabolizer you are, the worse it's going to be.
You said HRV, heart rate variability?
Yeah, heart rate variability, exactly, like a quality measure of resilience, if you will. And so if we look at those things, when we look at paraxanthine, we see that it increases BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor associated with neuroplasticity, keeping the brain young, protecting neurons, the brain cells, as well as creating new brain cells. We used to think not more than 10, 15 years ago that wasn't possible.
Wow.
We thought that the brain, like, we got to protect what we got because that's all we got. Mm-hmm. BDNF and in part some other proteins like mTOR, which we always thought was just muscle protein synthesis. Now we know it's actually important for the brain. NGF, nerve growth factor, is important too. BDNF, NGF, mTOR, these are all increased with paraxanthine. So it's actually making your brain younger.
Wow. How did you guys measure that?
Literally through in vitro and in animal studies.
Wow. Okay. That's incredible.
So, and then you can measure it in humans, but you can only measure it in serum. Mm-hmm. With animals, you can measure it, after the kill in the brain. So we showed that it's actually not just increased in serum, but increased in brain tissue.
Wow.
So that's amazing that it's actually doing that on that level. Next, looking at dopamine, which is associated with that mood lift, productivity. We see that increased 50% greater than caffeine. We also see that increases acetylcholine, which is associated with like kind of deeper work. We see it increases serotonin, which I just read a beautiful article today that talked about dopamine and serotonin actually being like counter-regulatory to some degree, where dopamine like is you're chasing it, it's your desire, it's what's pulling you, and serotonin is what's giving you satisfaction and patience.
Wow.
So like you need actually like a kind of flow
Balance,
between the two, going back to that idea of like yin and yang. And so all of those are increased. And when we look at depression, by the way, we actually see the serotonin theory is deeply flawed. I talk about this quite a bit in my Bridging Science and Soul discussions. It's all the neurotransmitters are depressed, are down. Right? From epinephrine, norepinephrine, endorphins, acetylcholine, dopamine, serotonin, all of them are down. Your body is trying to feel less. It wants less to come in, less to process, less to deal with. You're traumatized. Don't give me more.
Do you think that's because of just us living in modernity as sort of like a meta framework? Because I look at us as human beings living in nature, exposed to harmonious electromagnetic fields, right? Like God created electromagnetic fields. And then in modernity, we're surrounded by so many non-native electromagnetic fields. And then we're also sort of acting as cogs in the wheels of this machine that has this in this go, 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 go mentality, also of which caffeine is fueling that go, 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 go mentality. So do we think that they're depressed across the board because of that? Or have you thought about that at all, of like why?
I think, to some end, I believe that we're in a very dopaminergic existence where we're chasing dopamine because of likes on social media, because of caffeine, because of not being able to focus on anything for any given period of time. There's a satisfaction that can happen. There's a relaxation that can happen when you are wholly present. And we're never present now. We're always distracted. Yes, it could be EMFs and toxins, but to me, it's more the lifestyle that we're living, where we're always chasing. A friend said, this is coming up, don't leave a good time for a good time. I think we're always chasing the good time, no matter how good it is present. If you were actually present, you wouldn't need the dopamine fix. Not saying dopamine's bad. It actually drives the majority of our decisions, but we're always leaving our good time for a good time.
Right.
We're not realizing how important presence is and to be in that moment, because in the past is worry and grief, and then in the future is anxiety. But in presence, like when you're talking about being connected to, source, to God, to your kids, to the family, to nature, like when you're having that coffee, like that's being present. That's going to have a dramatic impact on your neurotransmitters. And when we're always go, 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 like your body is staying in this mode of vigilance, thinking it needs to survive. And so those neurotransmitters are getting burned out, and then receptors are down regulating, production is down regulating, because it's trying to get to some type of like rest and digest parasympathetic. And we're just tapping into these things and pushing them too much. And what do? We add more sugar, we add more caffeine. We're trying to keep, it's like fixing the car while the car is going 100 miles an hour down the road. It's not going to happen. We need to pull the car over, and we need to like work on it. We need to, get some work done, take a break, be present, relax. But that's not happening very much now.
When it comes to caffeine and things like adrenal fatigue, or people who have had the experience of having to withdraw from caffeine, so many people describe feeling extremely tired for days on end. And my question about that is is it that their bodies are actually tired and this is just the fatigue that they've needed to feel that they've been suppressing that is sort of compounded over time? Or is it that the caffeine has rewired their nervous system to just be in constant fight or flight to where they're just all out of whack. They're not actually tired, but they feel incredibly tired.
Yes.
Yes, on both. Okay.
Yeah, I think both of those are.
I know that was kind of worded the wrong way.
No,
I think you get where
I
I'm
think
going
that's
with that.
fair. It's fair. Like I think the first one that you the first scenario that you stated was like, how did you word that exactly?
I basically said that, is it that this is compounding fatigue that we have been, that we've just never experienced, that we need to now feel, that we've been suppressing with caffeine?
So to that point, think about, why is fatigue bad?
Not.
What's wrong with fatigue? Like what's saying like, it's like, we don't want sadness. We don't want fatigue. We don't like what? Right. Like that's the human experience. Like ding dong. Like those are actually important things.
Yeah.
We can't be happy all the time. We can't be like, pressing on the gas all the time. You need to like downregulate. You need to relax. You need to like gather yourself. But we're making fatigue vilified. And you can argue that it's, capitalism. You can argue that we're, again, going back to chasing dopamine and this idea of like multitasking, which doesn't exist. And so it's actually task switching and it's exhausting. So
can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yes. Yeah, so please. Physiologically, it's one thing, but I think your latter scenario where you may not be physiologically exhausted or adrenal fatigue, as you put it, but mentally you can be exhausted. You can be overwhelmed because of task switching. There is no such thing as multitasking. What we're doing when we don't do like Cal Newport's idea of like deep work, right, is we're task switching. We're going back and forth and back and forth. And that's how a lot of kids are trained now, because, they're on social media, they're talking to each other, things are getting fired at them like every second. Like, it's like TikTok isn't good enough at 15 seconds. They have to like scroll through like it's like a quarter second. It's insane. This is task switching, and we're training our brain to be in this mode, and it's exhausting going back and forth, and nothing actually gets accomplished. But you feel overwhelmed and exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
You're using a lot of ATP. It takes, on average, about 2 to 3 minutes to reset your brain and get back on task. So every time you're switching, you're really, the only thing you're accomplishing is hiding from what you actually want to accomplish.
That makes so much sense, especially on the 2 to 3 minutes, because when I'm picking up a book that I'm coming back to, I go back to the last 2 pages I had just read, just so I can by the time I'm reading what I'm supposed to be reading, I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm fully present.
Yeah.
That's sad. Is that like common for human beings, normal for human beings? Like,
it is now.
Yeah. So it's common, it's not normal. It's
modernity, I believe is the word you use, which I've never actually heard and I actually like, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
But that would make sense now. I think the idea of being like, a Zen Buddhist or something seems so wild now, like that much unplugging and just in breath for like 20 hours. What? Like that would literally be hell for most people. I remember when I was kind of in this overworked phase and I did like a sensory deprivation chamber. It was an hour in that thing with no noise, no light. And it was like a mental prison for me that felt like 300 hours.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the way your brain is trained, then that's not easy.
Mm-hmm. So you basically agree, though, finishing that thought, I know we're going off on a lot of tangents here, that the caffeine, you could say, for those who are consistently drinking it, as just a means to survive on a day-to-day basis, have not allowed their bodies to feel that fatigue that is necessary for them to feel. They've been in a constant state of fight or flight. Okay, so you're nodding on that, and then
where else does that show up in your life?
Exactly.
You're literally gaslighting, suppressing your own physiologic experience.
Yeah.
We were just talking about this earlier about not feeling your feelings. Part of that is experiencing your experience. You're bypassing yourself. You're not allowing yourself to feel fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
That's a great question.
Why?
Right.
I mean, really, like, take a second. If someone's like hearing this, why?
Yeah.
Why are you not allowed to be tired? Why are you not allowed to have fatigue? Like, pause this if you need to. Like, think on that.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it's a really important point. Like it leads you to so many other questions about like, why am I feeling fatigue in the first place? Like, what is the cause of that? Like, what am I also not feeling if I'm not feeling fatigue? There's so many things. It's not just the, withdrawal symptoms from caffeine. It's so many other things there too.
Yeah. And and the opposite end of that is, why do I need to feel stimulated all the time?
Right.
You lack the ability to feel because you've made your baseline experience stimulated.
Boom. Mic drop moment right there. Feel that, all right? No, I'm just kidding. No, but for real though, like so many people can't just like be still. And I think that caffeine is sort of fueling that epidemic of not being able to be still. Yeah,
90% of the planet is consuming it. So yes, almost the entire planet. What is it? Maybe like over 7 billion people are experiencing caffeine daily and are bypassing themselves and their ability to relax, their ability to feel.
Yeah.
To be present.
Do you still drink caffeine at all?
No.
Not at all.
I mean, in trace amounts and something, but no.
Yeah, good. How long have you been going without any like sort of caffeine or coffee?
Years, because it just, for me, I'm really on that slow metabolizer end of the spectrum, and it causes me a lot of anxiety, sleep disruption. I already had considerable sleep issues the majority of my life, and of course, you could argue some of that was the vigilance and those components. So caffeine added to that equation is just exacerbates that whole issue. And I used to have to use Lunesta and Ambien and Xanax and all these different things, and all the supplements and cannabinoids and, all the things. And I still struggled to sleep. So I definitely, once I understood that, removed caffeine from the equation.
Incredible.
And I wanted to feel some degree of enhanced focus and nootropic benefits at times. And that's where I worked on energy ingredients. In the past, it was T-crine, which is theacrine, dynamine, which is methylliberine, and now paraxanthine.
Awesome. So paraxanthine, I think let's start there. I know we've touched on it a little bit.
Yeah.
But what exactly is it? I know that you have like patented it in the form of what's called infinity, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're not the one who discovered paraxanthine. No. Okay.
No, it occurs naturally. It's a metabolite of caffeine. What metabolite means is your body is converting it. If you understand organic chemistry, it's removing a methyl group, which just means a hydrogen. So it's removing a methyl group from different positions on this 1,3,7 trimethylxanthine, that's caffeine. So a demethylation would be only leaving 2 methyl groups. So those 2 methyl groups, the next row, the metabolism that's happening in the body, is going to result in 1 of 3, because there's 3 different methyl groups. When you go down to 2, 1 of 3 different compounds. And that's going to be theobromine, theophylline and paraxanthine. People have asked me this all the time. If paraxanthine existed and we knew about it, why did no one bring this out to market? Why did no one work on patents around this? I think there's a few reasons. I think one, it was assumed that 70 to 80% of caffeine converts to paraxanthine. So what would be the actual benefit?
Because everyone's already getting it anyway.
Everyone's already getting it anyway.
Right. That's their assumption.
That's their assumption. What that doesn't take into account is that the longer we're stuck with caffeine, the more side effects we're having. And of course, if we're a slow metabolizer, we're having lots of side effects and basically none of the benefits of paraxanthine because it's a slow drip. You're not experiencing paraxanthine in its fullness. Two, you're avoiding theophylline and theobromine and their metabolites. Theophylline has a ton of side effects. It's a controlled substance, bronchodilator, like known for arrhythmias and anxiety and all those things. And then lastly, paraxanthine is where you're getting all the benefits. So if we isolate that out, remove caffeine, theophylline, theobromine from the equation, then what we get is a wholly different experience, a clean experience, where you're not getting the toxicity and side effects, where you're getting the same effect whether you're a fast or slow metabolizer of caffeine. So now we're talking about the same experience. When you and I talk about caffeine, we're not talking about the same thing. With paraxanthine, we are. Also, there's no habituation or adaptation. So no physiologic dependence and no adaptation effect where it takes more and more and more to get the same effect because of diminishing returns. As a matter of fact, we have a study coming out with e-gamers showing that the more they take paraxanthine, the better the effects. Why? Because we believe it is neuroprotective and neuroenhancing. So instead of coming at a cost, as Michael Pollan pointed out in his book, Caffeine, it's literally giving you the benefits you want acutely and when used chronically, making your brain healthier.
Wow.
Because it's increasing those neurotransmitters. It's increasing BDNF. It's increasing nitric oxide to the brain 50% greater than caffeine by PDE9 inhibition. It's decreasing beta amyloid plaque. It's increasing glutathione and catalase and decreasing oxidative stress. And if I'm to tell you all the ways that the brain ages, neurodegeneration like associated with Parkinson's, dopamine deficiency. Depression and staying in kind of a cognitive lack of resilience is going to be associated with BDNF being decreased. Blood flow to the brain, obviously critical to keep the brain young and functioning well. Oxidative stress, going to be a primary way the brain ages. And so if we think about all of these things and beta amyloid plaque associated with Alzheimer's, if we think about all these things, paraxanthine's reversing all of those. So with continued use, it's actually making the brain healthier and not coming at a cost without the adaptation, without the habituation. So this is the game changer where people thought essentially it's just, I get all that with caffeine. No, you don't. You're getting a lot of what you don't want, and you're not really getting to paraxanthine in this drip drop experience. So this is where when people experience paraxanthine infinity, they're having a paradigm shift, a completely different experience where they're saying like you, where I feel like in the flow, or I had a golfer say that he could see the dimples on the ball. Like I feel connected. I feel lifted. I didn't feel the crash. We see improved HRVs on paraxanthine, not worsened.
Yeah. So I can totally see that in my experience, like with how I feel in my body drinking that.
Yeah. So it's not a come at a cost ingredient. And this is why Update is really incredible because it's combining that with other nootropics, and it's not also come at a cost because it's nothing artificial and there's no sugar. So it's really a clean experiential product, whether you're talking about Paraxanthine in isolation or in update. This is a truly experiential product. And this is why I can talk about the science all day long. But when someone experiences it, I only need to put it in your hand once and you'll be like, oh my God. And if you could go a week without your caffeine and drop into this, when you go back to caffeine, you'll realize how abusive and toxic that relationship is. Literally, it is a toxic relationship for you where it's truly coming at a cost and you know it.
Yeah.
But it becomes very clear just how bad that relationship is once you free yourself from it and get into this for a week. Game changer.
Have you used or had anyone use Paraxanthine to help facilitate withdrawal from caffeine?
Absolutely.
Like in a very obviously you're like getting people to drink update, but in a very intentional way, like, hey, shit, you're experiencing withdrawal effects from caffeine. This might be a good thing to use.
I mean, that's what Daniel, who's kind of just off the set right now. He's the CEO.
Shout out to Daniel.
Shout out to Daniel, CEO of Update. A brilliant dude and the founder and CEO of Update. And he has the backing of his amazing friends, the Hess brothers, the highly accomplished billionaires coming from the Hess oil and gas family, Mikey and David, who are backing this because they believe in it. Everyone believes in it. Everyone like drinks this. We have a slew of biohackers in the industry now, like all investors in this and drinking it. And it's not because they're investors. They drank it and then they wanted to become investors.
Totally.
And it's really cool because it is so experiential. It really shifts the way that you feel. And this is why we're calling it Caffeine 2.0 or a better way forward or caffeine evolved, because this doesn't come at a cost. It actually makes you healthier. So you're getting the benefits you've been looking for without that abuse.
Mm-hmm. It's what people who start drinking coffee need without realizing that they need.
Yeah.
This is actually the replacement, just like you said, Caffeine 2.0. How did you come across Paraxanthine? Like what tipped you off to it?
Yeah, it was the work I had already done in methylxanthines, methyl urates is like I said, theocrine and methyliberine. That's T-crine and dynamine are the branded names. Those are in hundreds and hundreds of pre-workouts, energy drinks, fat burners, things like that. That had led me down a path of, and I had already been heading down this path because I didn't deal with caffeine well. And these were cleaner alternatives. But I had yet to come across Paraxanthine because I too was like, caffeine's metabolism. You know, caffeine is so straightforward, is the most studied ingredient on the planet. How am I going to unlock anything out of that? There's no possible way.
Yeah.
And yet, some of the most brilliant inventions are going to be the things that we look at every day and we say, that's the way it is. Those are the things that if you figured those out, change humanity.
Like water, for example. Like we're referring back to Gerald Pollack, Veda Austin. People assume like, oh, water, we know everything there is to know about water. It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere.
Right.
And we don't know shit about water.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or the ocean, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, 75% of the planet is the ocean. We don't know anything about the ocean.
Yeah, literally nothing.
So there you go.
That's how you found it. Okay. So then what was the idea for Update? How did that come about once you had sort of looked into Paraxanthine? Actually, before we get there, if you don't mind, so you're tipped off to this, like you're already headed down this path for a replacement from caffeine. And then what led you to start looking into Paraxanthine in terms of like actually studying it? And did that look like you just using it on yourself first, or how did you find it back then?
Well, I already had a partner in China that I had worked on so many different ingredients with. I already had two German scientists, friends that helped me with intellectual property. I already had a machine created around me that when I dream up ideas, I can turn them into reality.
Awesome.
So one, from like a feasibility standpoint of synthesizing it and scaling it up with my partner in China. Two, and by the way, fully GMP produces for like pharmaceutical companies. Like people think China and they have all kinds of things. It's not like that.
Yeah.
Two, these guys that I work with that help me with the intellectual property and study execution helped me on whether these ideas can be thoroughly patented, protected, whether it makes sense on that feasibility standpoint. And so I can come up with these ingredients like that, and I can dream them up, and within weeks I can be trying it, know what the cost of it will be, know what the intellectual property profile around it is. I can have a full understanding of an ingredient like that. And when I knew that, wait a sec, this ingredient really hasn't been studied that much in isolation, hasn't been patented really at all, and I can't find anyone who's used it in isolation, I'm like, oh my God. I have to like delve into this.
So did you try it yourself? Is that what happened?
Yeah,
dude.
Yeah, of course. And
it's so funny because like that type of I really got to give you like a round of applause for that, because when it comes to new stuff like that, that could be a freaking disaster. But you're like,
well, you know, when you understand, there are potential risks, but when you understand the
metabolism,
the biochemistry of it, and what I would call like interpolation, extrapolation, like I feel like it's pretty well understood. We did study it in animals, like shortly thereafter, and did all the grass and toxicology work, generally recognized as safe, where you use it at like 10-fold, 50-fold, like what you would in humans, and try and deeply understand it from that perspective. This is dramatically safer and far, far, far less toxic than caffeine is on any level.
There's examples of people literally dying from caffeine. Like, it's actually pretty common that happens.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago that there was the news with Panera Bread and the charged lemonade. They had 400 milligrams, which is the upper limit, the generally recognized as safe daily limit for caffeine. And this was in 8 ounces of this charged lemonade. This girl may have already had caffeine that day, maybe was caffeine sensitive, maybe didn't know it was caffeinated lemonade, drank what could have been 3, 4, 5 of those probably, while she was having her lunch.
In Panera Bread?
Panera Bread, and dude, she died. And there was actually a few people that died, but that was,
my goodness,
that made national news.
Holy shit!
So yes, it does happen, and it can be very toxic, and we just don't see those side effects with paraxanthine. And yeah, for me, like it was just a completely different experience. I knew once I tried it that like this was so clean. And it wasn't until I had other people start trying it and giving me feedback that they were like, oh my God, this is so different. I thought it would be a little different than caffeine. I didn't know that it would be this different. And now I understand, thanks to all the research and diving into it on a much deeper level, like how much better it is. It is wholly different. But Daniel and I were working on, I'm also a formulator and work for companies, and Daniel had employed me to help him with this nootropic drink. And so we were working on this product, this update, and we kind of hit some walls, and we were like, it's pretty good. And he wanted really something more. And I was like, well, I am working on this one thing. I'm not supposed to talk about it yet. Like we haven't got all of our patents yet, but I can send it to you in a, kind of unlabeled, undisclosed, like generic looking powder and
unlabeled, undisclosed powder here. Let me send this to you.
Yeah. That's so Daniel started playing with it in his little kitchen lab. And he was like blown away by it. And he's like, we have to put this in. So I went back to my partners and I'm like, well, we literally hadn't talked to any companies yet. This was very early on in our process. And we're like, what if we worked with Daniel and like released it in an energy drink? And that's how it came to be. And it's been very exciting. There's been iterations that have come out in terms of flavor and the experience. We've improved upon the flavor. There's actually about to be a V3, a version 3 coming out in the next couple of weeks. Probably by the time this podcast goes live, that new version will be out where, even cleaner experience in terms of the taste, the sweetness profile. Again, no sugar, no artificial sweeteners. It will just be stevia-based compounds that really work front to back. I could go down a very deep rabbit hole on how flavoring works, but it's different stevioglycosides, rhabdosides that hit different parts of this flavor curve, front, middle, and back. So it really brings out a flavor experience, and that's being integrated into the formula now.
Wow. Going back to like being an ingredientologist, I like to call that an alchemist, dude. Like,
yes,
it's a form of alchemy.
I'm stepping into that word.
Yeah, like a form of alchemy. It really is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like taking multiple substances, synthesizing something that is like pure gold, so to speak. But so much of that is intention, and like when I can talk to the person that I know is creating something that I'm consuming, and get to know them and sit with their energy and have conversations with them, and ask them pressing questions on things, like it really makes me want that thing more, especially if I was already having positive effects associated with it previously. But it's like, oh, this is the informational field that is informing the ingredients that are going into this thing. That's a big deal, especially, like I said, because I'm highly skeptical of what goes on inside laboratory settings with synthesizing things. And especially because I think that as the wellness industry will continue to grow, it will be met with a lot of bad actors and people trying to hijack and greenwash things. But that's not the vibe that I get from you at all. And like I said, I've been drinking Update and I love it. It's incredible. So, how much, like, when it comes to the other ingredients that are complementary, how much of that was a very intentional, this almost seems like a rhetorical question, thought process on what pairs well with paraxanthine in order to bring about the best experience for the consumer?
That's something that matters deeply to me. First off, I need complementary mechanisms of action. There's no just throwing stuff in for marketing purposes. I need everything to be fully dosed and in there with intention, to your point. And it has nothing to do with legality or science or, accolades. Like, all of this is my legacy. As I mentioned earlier, I'm 50 years old. Like, I've accomplished quite a bit. I've built a reputation. I'm not only protecting that reputation, I'm thinking about what, to borrow from Gladiator, like what echoes forward into eternity. What is the net effect of this? I came out of a journey. Literally, I had an entire journey on paraxanthine one time.
Like a medicine journey?
Yes.
Got it.
And it hit me like a freight train that this will change humanity. If 90% of the population consumes caffeine and it's unhealthy for them, and this is the evolution, this is literally going to change humanity. And instead of that cognitive dissonance that come at a cost, that burden on the soul, that spiritual dissonance, this term came to me, catalyst of creation. Instead of caffeine dragging your limp, lifeless body along, this is a collaboration. This is the dance, the uplift, the movement that is going to make humanity healthier and better. Like I said, our data shows in this e-gaming study that people are healthier the more they continue to use it. They're performing better and better and better week after week.
But not dependency, though. That's
no
the thing.
dependency.
Yeah.
Here's another study. We did a 10K race where we did, for lack of a better term, going back to the idea of multitasking, but call it task switching, test before and after the race. You would expect they do the best before the race. They do worse after because they're fatigued. With paraxanthine, so there was actually 4 groups. There was placebo group, paraxanthine group, caffeine plus paraxanthine. When we gave the caffeine, and by the way, this is what's called like a crossover design. So we get to see like each, that's actually my favorite design because we get to see each individual and how they experience each one. Mm-hmm. So that data is actually better than just having randomized groups.
Right.
Because there's bio-individuality and all that kind of stuff. You understand that.
And especially when like you can, I won't say that you can negate the placebo/nocebo effect to any degree, but maybe to some degree minimize it a little bit more this way.
Yeah. Exactly. And so when we looked at caffeine, it had the highest amount of mental errors, 23%. Just below that was caffeine plus paraxanthine, because paraxanthine, while great, you're adding dirty water to your clean water, essentially. Below that, we saw placebo. That I think it was around like 8% increase in mental errors, to be expected, right? After a 10K race. What we saw with paraxanthine was a decrease in mental errors. It's actually improving the brain despite the fatigue. So we saw 10% decrease in mental errors. Therefore, the delta between the two, between the paraxanthine and the caffeine, is massive.
Wow.
These are very different substances in how they're experienced. And that's my point about people may think, oh, it just converts into that. No. It's not like that. This is a massively different experience. It's the flow without the frazzle. Mm-hmm. Caffeine is the frazzle. Both are stimulating to some degree. CNS stimulants, central nervous system stimulants. Paraxanthine's putting you into that flow state where it's optimizing blood flow and neurotransmitters and neuroplasticity, and not just wakefulness.
That's my experience. That's how I feel when I drink Update. So on the other ingredients, and I have them listed here, talking about like this sort of synergistic effects, for lack of a better term. Is that a good way to describe it? Yeah. Synergistic effects? Okay, so we have carbonated filtered water, citric acid, natural flavors, L-alpha GPC, paraxanthine, steviol glycosides, monk fruit, salt, L-theanine, vitamin C as ascorbic acid, and then vitamin B12. So I want to get to the synergistic effects, but I would be remiss if I didn't do this, and I'm sure you've had this asked before. When it comes to natural flavors, that's like the one part when I read it, I was like, because there's a lot of stuff justifiably in this sort of natural health space where people are, when they see natural flavors, they're like, I don't know about that because it can mean anything. There's just a lot of ways to hide chemicals in some cases, and sort of pass them off as, quote, natural flavors. So what does natural flavors mean in this context with Update?
That's a fair question, and that does come up. So basically, natural flavors, to define that first, can mean these chemical compounds that can occur naturally, meaning like you can find them somewhere in nature, and they've been shown to be generally recognized as safe. So it could be, let's say in a lime, you might get some of the lime flavor components as limonene. Mm-hmm. So now we're combining some different compounds that occur naturally, have been shown to be safe, to achieve a Valencia orange versus a mandarin orange, or different things like that. Like it's more aromatic, or more, it's got more astringency. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of elements to flavor. With the natural flavors that we have done, This is to achieve the best possible flavor, the most flavorful experience, and not like, yes, you could just have a juice extract.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the way potentially to achieve this without natural flavors. But those don't necessarily have the same potency, stability, might not combine in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
There is a chemistry to these things. So I won't say this is like a just trust us kind of thing, but it kind of is that.
Got
like
you,
I mean, I can tell you that I'm very conscious about consuming this myself and telling all my friends to consume this, of which, again, we have about 15 different brilliant biohackers, optimizers, whatever term you might want to use. And you're going to be coming to that experience. Several of us will be getting together. That matters to me. This goes back to my legacy. Some people say that they do this because of proprietary protection of a flavor too. I won't say that's really the reason. I just want to achieve the best flavor experience possible, and everything is safe and occurs naturally, and there isn't some compounds in there that are questionable. That's not going to happen.
So with you guys, everything in your natural flavors is safe and occurs naturally, and it's not hiding effed up, sketchy chemicals through, quote, natural flavors.
1,000%.
Okay, I can sit with that. That's good. That's good. The other one that stood out is vitamin C as ascorbic acid. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that a little bit too? Because I know some people understandably are sort of sketched out about that as well.
From what end? Is this because ascorbic acid could be isolated from corn? Is that
from my understanding, and maybe I'm incorrect on this, there's also that it could be a mold derivative too, like derived from mold.
No, so this is like a fermented synthesized source of L-ascorbic acid, which is pure vitamin C. There is no isolation of this. There is no potential mold sourcing of this. This is a clean source of vitamin C.
Got it. Okay, cool. Now, on the other ingredients, so what was thrown in here to be complementary to or to help enhance paraxanthine?
It's just paraxanthine.
Sorry, paraxanthine.
No worries. Everything is in there with intention. So alpha GPC is going to increase acetylcholine, one. And we've talked about how paraxanthine increases acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is associated with deep focused work. And then alpha GPC is also going to increase and enhance the phospholipids, which is the main, it's the cellular bilayer, but it's also critical in the majority of your brain is essentially like a fatty tissue. And so alpha GPC is the most bioavailable form of choline, passes the blood-brain barrier so that it can actually enhance the brain's function. And it's going to increase acetylcholine both at the gut and brain level. So for those reasons, it makes a lot of sense with paraxanthine. There's great data on it improving. We just did a study on it in isolation, and we saw 108% increase in focus, improvement in processing speed, really spectacular nootropic. Methylcobalamin. That is the optimized form of B12. All the methylated B vitamins are what you want. Mm-hmm. You do not want cyanocobalamin, which is actually a cyanide-bound form of B12 that does not occur naturally. Adenosylcobalamin, methylcobalamin, and then in food, typically hydroxycobalamin are the forms that are natural, whether endogenously to your body, meaning in the body, or exogenously, meaning like occurring in nature, like hydroxycobalamin. So the cyanocobalamin is a synthetic, terrible version of B12. So
I've heard some people do detox protocols with their kids using methylated B vitamins.
Yeah.
It's that helpful, that potent.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and you could go into, we could do the deep dive on methylated B vitamins. So like pyridoxine is also synthetic, and that's B6. When you go too high in pyridoxine, you actually get these neurological side effects. That's because it's actually inhibiting the endogenous form of B6, which is known as P5P, pyridoxal 5-phosphate. And so if you just supplement it with P5P, there is not that neurotoxic effect that the synthetic one has. Same with folic acid versus 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate.
I did a whole episode on folic acid toxicity and food fortification. Dude, that is the ultimate rabbit hole.
It's the ultimate
that no one talks about. No. More people are nowadays, but like no one talks about the toxicity of folic acid and food fortification.
Exactly. And so that's another one where you're not necessarily going to convert on these multiple enzymatic steps to get all the way to the methylated form, the 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate. So yes, having the methylated B vitamins are going to be the active form, and whether there's genetic issues, or whether it's just simply you're avoiding these synthetic unhealthy versions. Regardless, going with the methylated version is always going to be the better path and the more expensive path.
When you're talking about issues, are you referring to their like methylation problems that a lot of people have? Most people have methylation problems. I wonder that too, like, did our ancestors have methylation problems? Is it like an epigenetic trigger for the negative that is more common nowadays because of modernity, or is it like that? Did that occur in previous iterations of human beings? I don't know the answer.
I think it is your modernity idea, where you're just seeing with stress, as well as you could argue these fortification things, and stress could be, physiologic stress. Certainly psychological stress too, but physiologic stress from all these oxidative compounds, these toxins, these glyphosates, et cetera, EMFs, to all the points that you were making earlier. You're seeing those methylation issues, and it's resulting in expression like the COMT gene, all those kinds of things where we're seeing methylation errors. And that's where there's this massive, I'm sure there was some kind of bifurcation where we saw the rise of autism, the rise of cancer with these methylation errors, the rise of birth defects through those methylation errors, for sure.
Yeah. I wonder if it occurred right around or after 1986 for a lot of them. I don't know. That's a question without using the term for those products. Just after that occurred, let's say, pharmaceutical shield from liability for those products.
Well, also, yes, like, yes, that, but you could also argue in the late 60s when, I believe it was Nixon was charged to like how to make food more cost effective. Big Food came in and created ultra processed food. And then there was the fortification enrichment. And then you had the birth of Frankenfood.
Right. Yeah. It's everything. It's everything sort of working synergistically, like synergistic toxicity, if you will. Yeah. Okay. So on Update, the thing that I've noticed too, and I'm speaking to my own experience here, and I'd love to hear if this is the experience across the board. You mentioned there's no dependency associated with it, and that's absolutely my experience. I don't feel dependent on it or anything like that, like I've had with caffeine at certain points in my life, of course. And again, the energy feels very clean. There's not this jittery energy. There's no anxious energy. It's just more mental clarity for me. That's how I experience Update and Paraxanthine. But the question that I have is the diminishing effects associated with it. Have you looked into any?
Yeah, that's the adaptation effect. And we don't see that. So the first thing you're mentioning is the habituation. The second thing is the adaptation. We're not seeing either one of those occur in any of our studies.
Wow.
Yeah. And we always see that with caffeine, both of those.
Yeah. Well, that's what I've experienced with it for sure. So with caffeine.
And to that point, like I said, not only were you not seeing diminishing returns, we're seeing like the reverse adaptation effect where we're actually seeing it improve over time.
Wow. Yeah, that's what you mentioned on the brain health thing. That makes sense. Cool. And then no addictive problems at all. Like obviously habituation, like feeling the need for it, but there's different types of addiction. There's like the body-based addiction and then like this sort of mental addiction.
Yeah. And like from a neurotransmitter standpoint and a physiologic standpoint, there is no habituation or physiologic dependence, but you can never say clearly like whether a person enjoys feeling good and is not going to want that continuously. I don't know that if something's not coming at a cost and you continue to use it, if you would still call that dependence. I would like to think that dependence is when something is counterproductive to your organism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's reasonable. That's fair. Last one related to update, then I want to get into some of the other products or things you have patented, some other your alchemical creations. This is a tough one for me. The can. Have we thought about putting it in a glass bottle before?
I love that question.
Yeah.
That's a Daniel question.
Daniel, have you thought about putting it in a glass bottle? Got it. Okay, so powdered forms you can mix with water, essentially? Okay. Okay. I mean, again, like you give and take a little bit, right? Like here I am, like this is sitting on here literally every single episode. I think there is a humongous difference between injected aluminum. I think that's where a lot of people's concerns with aluminum are, justifiably. Aluminum phosphate, aluminum hydroxide in the form of injection. And of course, the CDC and the WHO refer back to studies in which it was ingested in order to try to claim that those substances are okay when injected, which is a completely different thing. But when it comes to drinking out of aluminum can, like I'm not going to sit here and say that it's the worst thing ever. I'm literally doing it every freaking podcast episode. I was just wondering for those who might be concerned with that on drinking out of glass. But what Daniel answered for those who weren't able to hear him off camera just now.
Yeah, we just finished a formulation around stick packs. So yeah.
Okay, awesome. So stick packs that you can just dump into a glass of water. So that's good. Awesome. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
You can add your structured water to it and go for it. Yeah.
That's a good question, actually. On the water piece, have you thought about, or do you guys do any form of structuring with the water that goes into this?
No, we've been waiting to work with you and explore that.
Okay. Well, Luke should hook you up with the guys from Analemma, because that would be really cool to be hooked up with them to structure the water that goes into Update.
I mean, we're open to that idea.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Feel complete on Update. So for those who are listening, watching, please head to the show notes if you're interested in trying this out. Again, I'm drinking these pretty frequently. I don't think I'm addicted to them by any means. I just enjoy the effects. And when I'm sitting having a conversation, they tend to help enhance my clarity of mind, my ability to articulate. Please head to the show notes, and we have a deal with Update now to offer to our listeners 25% off if you use our code. Thank you guys so much for that, by the way. I really appreciate it. Yeah. I'm going to be using that code myself to get more Update. Let's get into some of your other creations, some of the other things that you've patented. You've gifted me this box. Yeah. What was in that box again?
So I gave you some of the other ingredients that I've worked on that I've patented, one of which is dihydroberberine. That contains a branded form of what we call glucovantage that enhances GLP-1. It enhances AMPK, which is AMP kinase, which is important to this anti-aging pathway, essentially. So GLP-1, you've probably heard a lot about with some of these medications that are out on the market. Dihydroberberine does that safely. You probably heard about berberine, nature's Ozempic on TikTok, right? But berberine has a lot of issues with bioavailability, GI distress. Dihydroberberine is the metabolite of berberine. So in the gut, your body converts berberine to dihydroberberine. And actually back in the plasma in the blood, it's converting it back to berberine again. But when you just give the patient or consumer dihydroberberine directly, you're avoiding that step of conversion. You're avoiding the bioindividuality. You avoid the GI distress. You improve the bioavailability dramatically, and we get dramatically different results when it comes to lowering blood sugar, improving insulin sensitivity, improving body composition, like muscle to adipose fat ratio, and increasing GLP-1, which is associated with appetite and satiety as well. So we're also seeing that it has kind of this adaptogenic effect where it's not like causing you to bottom out. If, like, for example, you're fasting and you took dihydroberberine, what we see is it actually would increase ketone levels.
Wow.
It would normalize blood sugar. So if you're tending to be hypoglycemic, it's going to put you within normal limits. So it's kind of normalizing. Typically, most of us are in the too high range. About 93% of the population is metabolically dysfunctional. So that leads to pretty much nearly all disease states, as well as pro-aging with biological aging versus chronological aging. So metabolic dysfunction, mitochondrial dysfunction is at the heart of disease and aging. So this is why this is the ingredient that I deeply and passionately promote, besides paraxanthine, in terms of longevity, in terms of like feeling your absolute best. Because I think at the core, if we want vitality, it's going to be through that insulin sensitivity, that blood sugar management. What we see, like when insulin isn't dysregulated, we see growth hormone, growth factors, autophagy, mitophagy, all of these things improve dramatically. Senescent cells get dealt with appropriately. Basically, like telomere length stays longer. Sirtuin genes are activated. All the ways that you can think of aging and anti-disease and resilience are protected when blood sugar, insulin is lower. So we also see, at the same time, we see inflammation reduce. We see dyslipidemia reduced. All these different factors associated with dysregulated insulin and blood sugar are essentially remedied when we're doing that appropriately. So dihydroberberine is something that I'm truly, truly excited about.
And is that available for people to purchase? Okay.
Yeah.
Where can they find that?
You can go on Amazon. If you look up Glucovantage dihydroberberine, it's in probably, 30, 40, 50 products.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Do you have anyone that you specifically recommend that you know is cleanest or?
There is Peak Performance is a good one if you want it by itself. There are some formulations where it's in combination with, I really like something where it's going to have chromium. That's a trace mineral that's associated with insulin sensitivity, and a lot of us are deficient in it, especially type 2 diabetics or people that are insulin resistant. And that helps normalize that. I also think cinnamon in particular synergizes well with it. And there's a couple products on there, I'm not recalling all of them right now, that have those combinations of ingredients that I would look for.
Why cinnamon?
So there's a number of mechanisms for GLP-1. And it's one thing to promote GLP-1 synthesis. It's another thing to look at receptor activity as well as uptake. And so cinnamon actually helps with that end. So they're going to be synergistic when combined.
Hey, y'all, I'm here with Melissa Kupsch from Remedy Academy of Homeopathy. We are so stoked here at the Way Forward to be partnering with Melissa and Remedy in order to spread the message of homeopathy across the world, and also to partner on the eventual development of healing centers across the United States.
People are pretty quickly coming to realize that frequency is the future of medicine. We are witnessing the great resurgence of homeopathy right now. We're really moving away from that suppressive medical model, whether it's for eczema, asthma, hormones, fertility, anxiety, depression, trauma, whatever it is, it all starts as energy in the person's field first. If we change our field, we can completely change our life. Our 2-year academy is open worldwide to anyone who wants to become a homeopath. We've got 5 lecturers and we currently have over 500 students enrolled, which is record numbers in our field. A career in homeopathy is amazing for anyone who wants flexibility in their work and who wants to be valuable in creating this new world. We have stay-at-home parents enrolled. We have ex-medical professionals, grandparents signed up who want to learn how to heal their grandchildren and pass on that invaluable knowledge. We even have husband and wife teams. So my husband enrolled in the course with no prior knowledge of health as a background, and he is loving it.
Kylie is also enrolled as well, so my partner is, and she's so stoked to become a homeopath and to be helping to spread this message across the world.
The thing that we hear from so many of our students is, I found my thing. Homeopathy is the key. We harness frequencies from nature and we alter the field of all creations. So if anybody wants to join us or they want to know more about it, they can visit our website.
Yeah, and all that information will be in the show notes. So if you want to learn more about Remedy Academy, also RMDY Collective, also some of the homeopathic products that they have, please just head to the show notes. All of that will be listed there. So my last question is related to like your formulation process, like what is happening internally with you, especially because we brought up alchemy a number of times on this episode. What is occurring inside of your body? Like what do you experience internally when you are in the act of this alchemical creation process of formulation?
Such a great question. I've really been exploring that. And I have a friend, Brandon Fung, that has this, the find your 4. And he does you're exploring your 80-20, and then he's taking the 80-20 of that, and you get down to your 4. Mm-hmm. And the 4% is what's driving like a lot of your passion, a lot of your decisions. That's where your happiness really would occur. It's 4% that are really critical to your joy. And so finding that 4% is going to radically change your life. Mm. And I've been exploring that. And for me, there's exploration, creativity, collaboration, looking at something differently than the way others look at it is exciting to me. I also know that I am ambidextrous, meaning like left and right handed. And I think my brain is that way, where I have my genius is that I'm good at the creative, the artistic, as well as good at the scientific, and I can bridge the two. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean I'm the best at either one. My scientist buddies are brilliant at knowing the details of science, getting into the minutia, but that's where they live.
Right.
The creativity to them they're completely lost on.
You bridge the gap.
And I have friends that are brilliant artists and musicians, and I'm just in awe of them. Mm. And I am not that. I am, that bridge. And that's just, for a long time, I thought like I was just the jack of all trades, master of none. But then I realized that is mastery in and of itself, if you let it be the gift.
If you use that gift effectively.
Yeah.
Sounds like you do. Yeah. So with your, let me ask this. What is like the coolest experience you've had through formulation, like that just made you feel alive?
There's a couple of them. The first product that I ever formulated, it was called Ultima. It was a pre-workout, and I was still working in nursing homes and hospitals, but I was working on the side doing formulations. I was a registered dietitian, chief clinical dietitian. And a company came out with my formula. It was a $30 COGS, cost of goods, which is insane. So it ended up being like an $80 pre-workout. Unsurprisingly, did not sell that well, but it worked really well. And I was really proud of it, and probably sold like 1,000 units, but it was the greatest thing ever to me to see it alive on the internet. It was on bodybuilding.com at the time. And then the next one was when I worked with Dymatize, and I worked on a bunch of different proteins, reformulated all their proteins, pre-workouts, everything. And I went into a GNC and just saw like a whole shelf of like all the products that I worked on. That was mind blowing to me. And then also, like, when I was there at Dymatize, we would have all these athletes come in that I looked at as like a really big deal, you know, these like professional bodybuilders, figure fitness. And they would talk about how they're using them every day. Like, thank you. Like, this is amazing. This is part of my process, part of my success. And it just makes my heart sing.
Yeah.
And then the T-crene, dynamine, and paraxanthine thing, because I've suffered with caffeine, to know that like millions of people have consumed these in place of caffeine. Millions. And then all the ingredients I've worked on, maybe it's like over 100 million people have taken my ingredients or something like that. Like maybe more. I don't really know. But there's
that's a big deal though, man. Like
it's crazy. Like you know, it, on one hand, there's joy from that. And also it goes back to, you know, the idea of the Spider-Man thing with like, with great power comes great responsibility. Like I take that very seriously, very seriously. These aren't just like, I couldn't just screw over or hurt a couple people. It could be millions, hundreds of millions. Take that very seriously.
That's what I was just about to say. And that's why I said that's a big deal. And that's why I so appreciate sitting down with you, having this conversation when I'm consuming like your creation right here. It's like to get to know the individual and what informs their process and how connected they are, which you are a very connected man, connected to your craft, connected to the creator, connected to yourself, connected to your emotions, connected to emotional intelligence, connected to other people who also all respect you because of the stuff that you're creating. Like that speaks volumes, especially in the age of like becoming aware of these sketchy pharmaceutical companies, like who's actually like doing the work to make these products that they're trying to coerce us to take. This is like the antithesis of that. This is the exact opposite, where I'm sitting down with a guy who's creating these things, and you're a freaking awesome dude, man. Like it's really cool.
I am the guy that ideates, but also none of this happens on me alone. You know, Daniel is the CEO of Update. I have a team, ING2, associated with really protecting the patents, doing the studies, a team at N&B that made the ingredients, a team at TSI that sells paraxanthine. My fiance, Hannah, who's also here, has been a massive part of my happiness, my success, my getting my name out there, amplifying all the things that I do. You know, at every step of the way, like they talk about how the graveyard is filled with great ideas. You know, and it would be a travesty if I went to the graveyard with all these great ideas. So I feel very blessed that I have great ideas, but they can be actioned upon.
which circles us back to the question that you never had a chance to answer. We'll wrap it up here.
Okay.
I talked about the objective creator who is omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, omnibenevolent, and our ability to co-create in this realm. You smiled, and then we never got a chance for you to actually give your take on that. So maybe that's a good way to close this out. Given that you're someone who is actively co-creating things and you've cultivated a team, attracted a team around you who is able to bring your ideas into reality pretty quickly, like that says a lot. So I'd love to hear your take on that.
Wow. I do feel that we are coming into a new age where COVID was, I believe, the Great Awakening, like the Matrix. I don't know how much sci-fi you watch with like 13th Floor. There's a lot of different ideas similar to the Matrix that have been executed before, but it was like the great unplugging, the great awakening, and there truly was a bifurcation where people are choosing. Like I think Joey Pants was the actor in Hollywood that like he wanted to go back into the Matrix. It was easier. There are people that just want to stay plugged in. It's easier. And there's people that are truly waking up and saying, I want something new, something different. This is not working for me anymore. This dissonance, I am tired of it. I am disconnected from source, from creator, from friends, from family, from purpose, from passion. I'm not living my ikigai. I don't love life. I don't love myself. I don't love in general. And that disconnection created that dissonance. And people are saying, I want to be connected again. I want to collaborate. I want to play. I don't just want to perform. You know, men are tired of performing. Like, did I get an erection? Did I please them? Like, did I work hard enough? Did I accomplish enough? Oh, how much do you make? What do you do for a living? What's your car? What's your penis size? What's your this? What's your that? We're exhausted from that. And women are exhausted from how clean is your house? How many kids do you have? Like, you know, what's your man do? Like, you know, like, are you, pretty enough? Can you stay young forever? Mm-hmm. What fashion are you wearing? Everyone's exhausted from this capitalistic nonsense. It's not serving us. It's creating insecurity and pain. It's driving a wedge between our connection. We feel less connected. And what was COVID about? Creating disconnection. Everyone around you is a vector for disease. Stay away. Wear your masks. Hide your face. Isolate. Put this sanitizer all over your skin. Kill your microbiome. Don't let your bodies communicate. Stay under the fluorescent lights. Breathe the recycled air. Stay safe. I think people are sick of staying safe. They want to have purpose. They want to be connected. They want to love. They want to live. They don't want to survive. And I think we're done following someone else's narrative, following someone else's reason for being, making other people rich off of our misery. I think we're all done. And I think that's the way forward.
Epic. Man, that was amazing. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. For this whole episode, for this whole discussion. That ending, though, could not have been better. So thank you so much for being here, Shawn. I really appreciate this. Yeah.
I appreciate it too. Like, just closing on this, like, I really want to honor you. I do a lot of podcasts, and I've talked to Hannah, my fiance, about this, that sometimes I'll finish a podcast and I will feel, to the end that we were talking about, exhausted, because like, I feel like I'm not only performing, but I'm also bringing them along.
Yeah.
Like trying to hold this whole thing together.
Yeah.
And when you have someone great you're conversating in, you just get lost in it. It's so easy. There's just so much flow to it, and it actually invigorates you, and you feel like more energized than at the start. So thank you for that. Like, it was a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, bro. Basically what you just said is I'm Update and I'm not coffee.
There you go. Exactly. Exactly. It's time for an update, everyone.
Update is the way forward.
Yes.
No, for real though, in all seriousness, for those who are watching and listening as we're closing out, as I've already said in this episode, Update has graciously given our listeners, viewers, our members a discount on Update. Again, I drink it consistently. This is not a freaking ad. I literally do. Before I even knew Shawn, had the chance to sit down with him, Luke's story was like, hey man, I have these pretty incredible, like nootropic, I guess you could call them that, right?
Yeah,
like nootropic drinks. You want to try them out? I was like, yeah, let's try them out. I'm always open to try something new. I was like, dude, these are amazing. And he's like, okay, cool. I actually want to hook you up with the guys who made them. And then that's, evolved into this. And I actually do drink these pretty consistently. So, so in the show notes, just click the link there and type in TWF at checkout and you'll get 25% off on Update. So thank you so much, Shawn. Daniel, thank you, who is sitting in the back here. We weren't able to hear your voice, but we'll make sure that happens next time. Thank you for creating this incredible product, man. I really appreciate it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.